Welcome to Badger Beer Hour, the February 2021 edition. Hello, Landon and Chris. How you doing?
Doing good, man.
All right.
Thumbs up over here.
Without further ado. What's going on, Landon?
Oh, we got beer news, of course. That's what's going on. We're gonna start with a big update to a nice story from last month's news segment to start off.
Yeah. Really excited to pass on a little update about Operation SOS. If you watched last month, you'll remember that this is the collaboration initiative that's short for Save Our Spots, led by Three Sheeps Brewing in Sheboygan. It's aimed at, the intent here was to provide a kind of hypey beer release that's available exclusively at bars and restaurants to give a little pandemic winter boost to those businesses. And the first beer was an outstanding hazy IPA using Belma and Talus hops that was brewed with collaborators at Third Space in Milwaukee and Youngblood Beer in Madison, which is we've had both of those breweries on as guests. That release went off pretty well, and what I'm hearing is that most of that beer sold out pretty quickly, which was exactly the intent. And there's at least 2 more releases planned now. This is turning into a series. So the next Operation SOS should be dropping later this month. It's another hazy IPA. This one's going to have a more dank profile versus the kind of juicy, and it was a really interesting beer. Last time it was little on the floral, kind of almost like rose-like side. That was a cool compliment to the super juicy. I think it was Talus was the super juicy hop in that one. Anyway, so this one's going to be a little bit more on the dank side. Get your Cat P there, one of my favorite IPA characters. And the collaborators this time around are 608 Brewing in La Crosse and 1840 Brewing in Milwaukee. Got a little number theme going there. I don't think that was intentional, but that's pretty cool. And then there's going to be a third round released in March, and no info on that yet, at least for me. But the Three Sheeps reps that I talked to said they're open to continuing it, basically as long as there's a need to kind of support these businesses and an interest in continuing it. So if you want to get these beers, you want to keep an eye on the Three Sheeps social channels. And since this is going out through their distribution channels, you'll be able to find it on the beer finder on their website. They've got a little, I think it's Find Us link up on the top. Remember, if you're going to do this, pick up some takeout. If it's offered, tip liberally. This is the whole point of this, is to support the businesses and the people who work there. And obviously this is a pretty brutal winter for these businesses, and it was already going to be that before we got all this crappy snow and cold that we've had the past couple of weeks. So your orders really do make a difference, and we can do this. We can keep these places alive through spring. One other interesting aspect of this that I wanted to mention was that intent of offering it only to certain customers actually caught the eye of the State Department of Revenue, which suggested to Three Sheeps that it probably did not meet the legal standards. Essentially, that it's discriminatory not to offer it to all types of retailers. And I'm not sure exactly how they work this out, but the Three Sheeps guys, Grant Pauly and Jordan Aberman, that I talked to, were confident that they'd be able to work with something that and honor the intent of Operation SOS while still following the law and offering this product really to make it available to everywhere. I kind of hope that everybody holds to what it's supposed to be and just buys it from bars and restaurants. And if you see it at a bottle shop, you kind of say, well, aren't you interesting there? But hey, that's up to you. So yeah, that's the Three Sheeps update today.
No good deed goes unpunished, huh?
That's right. Well, I mean, I should say that the Three Sheeps guys were very, they were very conciliatory. I mean, they didn't feel victimized by this. I mean, I think once it came to their attention, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And I believe they were going to work with DOR to kind of make it, to find a just way forward, I guess.
Sure.
I'm just excited for that Third Space Youngblood Three Sheeps collab. Man, that sounds great.
Ooh, you better hurry, man. I think it's probably, if you want to get it, you better get it soon.
It sounds great.
Right on.
All right. Next up, we've got a bunch of openings and closings, and we're going to start with the Door County town of, and if I get this wrong, I'm sorry, Ephraim, right? Getting its first craft beer business. What gives here, Chris?
All right. So this is according to a report in Door County Pulse. This is a place called Bad Moravian, and it's an offshoot of Ephraim Coffee Lab, located next door to that business in a former menswear shop. It's a craft focused bottle shop, and it opened on January 20th. And eventually they're planning on adding a few draft lines as well. So they'll be kind of one of those hybrid bottle shop tap rooms. I mean, how can you reasonably claim to be the only or the first beer centric business in a town like that when you opened in 2021 in Wisconsin? Until 2016, Ephraim was a true Wisconsin anachronism in that it was a dry town, allowing no liquor sales.
Wow.
So Bad Moravian's name is actually an homage to the Norwegians of this notoriously temperance-minded religious sect, I guess, I think is probably more accurate, who settled in Ephraim in 1853. So this is like, 100 and oh boy, math. It's many decades and like centuries of being a dry town. So manager Sophie Nelson, she's running the place. She actually was raised Moravian right there in Ephraim. So this is not like one of those, inappropriate. I don't know. You can decide if it's inappropriate, but it's coming. She's coming from a place close to the Moravian heart. So.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. And then unfortunately, there's always an unfortunate side. So we've got a couple closings to report too.
Yeah. And the first one's a brewery, and this is a tough one. Port Huron Brewing in Wisconsin Dells posted January 27th that it's closing permanently. Didn't really cite any clear reasons why, but I mean, its previous post on Facebook was like 10 months ago in late March. So, and it sounds like the tap room had been closed since then. So, this brewery was opened in early 2012 by Tanner Bretthorst. He's a brewer who trained under Kirby Nelson, who was then at Capitol, and Tom Porter of Lake Louie. I've met Tanner a couple times, and few people in the brewing industry really matched his enthusiasm and humbleness. And I really hate to say this about anybody because you don't really know anybody. In these kinds of, the way I meet these people are typically, as a journalist and a source basically, but you get a feel that Tanner was just an awesome guy or is. It's not like he's gone. Gone. But I'll fondly remember his Oktoberfest and his Hefeweizen as kind of standout beers. It was a pretty solid portfolio that I think it wasn't big time beer, but I think that I probably bought it more often than I would have otherwise because of Tanner himself. It's that personal connection. And in modestly less somber news, I guess, Good City Brewing here in Milwaukee has announced the closure of its gorgeous downtown Milwaukee event space across from Fiserv Forum. The tap room and barrel aging facility on the first floor is staying open, but there's no events happening right now. So those weddings and corporate events that was the lifeblood of that part of the business, and that's just not happening. It opened in January of 2019, and it's literally across the plaza from Fiserv Forum. it's all glass enclosed, and it's got an amazing view of the arena. You know, that big sweep with the neon. It's super cool. And it's not like it's over. It's actually being taken over by none other than the Bucks themselves. So the team is actually going to run it. They're the landlord for a lot of that stuff down there, and the owners of the Bucks are, you know, that's the Deer District. Like that's all their stuff. So I guess they're going to run it for the next, well, I guess ongoing. Good City's East Side Tap Room, East Side Milwaukee Tap Room is unaffected by this news, and it kind of has the feeling of like a refocusing of their efforts in light of last month's news that Good City would be opening a new tap room in Wauwatosa later this spring. So one closing, one opening seems like kind of you know, of a piece, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that they're not closing the tap room. I was pretty excited about that when they first announced that, and of course, haven't been down to Milwaukee in quite some time, but definitely want to go see that.
Yeah. That tap room does a lot of business during game days, and it seems like there's not quite that critical mass of traffic and you know, regular customers other days. So obviously the Bucks just started. They had their first game with fans here in Milwaukee last night. It was like 200 or something, but they're hoping to get up to, you know, maybe 1,800 fans. I think it is by within a couple weeks. So I don't know what that translates to as far as tap room, you know, action, but hopefully it's something better than what it's been.
Absolutely. All right, Chris, speaking of pandemic effects, we have some movement on the legislative front to talk about.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. Earlier this month, there's a proposal introduced in the legislature to allow alcohol delivery. And the details here is that it would allow both curbside delivery, that's become standard at restaurants. You know, they'll take your stuff out to the car, but also straight up home delivery of like a sixer of beer or handle of whiskey from either phone or online sales. Delivery could be made by the retailer or by a third-party service like Drizzly, which doesn't operate here because it's not allowed yet. But that company was just sold for like $1 billion to Uber. So there's some money in this. And in the past 11 months, a lot of states have relaxed their laws prohibiting alcohol delivery. But such efforts here in Wisconsin never went anywhere, along with basically any legislation proposed in 2020 in Wisconsin. This one's a long ways from becoming reality at this point. It had a public hearing on February 4th, but it does have bipartisan support. Two co-sponsors are Dewey Strobel and Francesca Hong about, you know, I would say those are on opposite ends of the opposite parties. So when they're seeing eye to eye, that's an interesting coalition. So now there are pretty significant lobbies lining up against this, including the Tavern League of Wisconsin, the State Beer Distributors Lobby, and a public health group, which most of those lobbies oppose anything that could lead to increased alcohol use. Supporters, though, include Hy-Vee, Quick Trip, and the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. So I think it's interesting that the Restaurant Association and the Tavern League are on opposite sides of this, because those business models are pretty much the same thing. They would be operating the same, you know, the same kind of function under this proposal. So I mean, like they're both doing the same thing. So right. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know. Do you guys where do you guys come out on this?
Do you think that they'll allow mixed drinks to be delivered too?
My understanding is that already is legal.
Really?
Oh no, I'm sorry, not delivery. No. But yeah, you can get to-go beverages. I don't know about that. Maybe.
I would say if that were the case, then the restaurants are probably on the same side, because if you can get your drinks to go and your food to go and get that delivered, you know, you say, I'm gonna get a Bloody Mary and a fish fry. get that delivered to me, why not?
I don't think that this covers that. It looks like I just checking the bill text here, and it looks it's consumption. Oh wait, hold on.
So I'm not gonna lie to you. I'd make a decent Bloody Mary, but the people in the bars make it way better.
So if the bottle is sealed, they can do it to go.
Okay.
So probably those mixers, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
or wine coolers or something like that. And I don't know. Of course I'm game for anything that's another outlet for our brewers. So if our brewers can deliver, they can get what is another thing. I mean, whatever they can do to monetize what they have and not waste, and to get it to consumers and people be safe and people feel safer. I'm all game. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on the Tavern League. We could talk an hour on those guys.
I'm pretty proud of the story that we published in the magazine this month by Zach Brook about the Tavern League. It was a feature length profile of Tavern League and their efforts during the pandemic time, and really generally about and weighing that against public health. You should definitely check us out on Milwaukee Magazine, MilwaukeeMag.com. You can find that story.
Yeah, I'll post that to my social media.
It's guys. Looking at the bill text, it's not super clear to me if mixed beverages are treated the same as packaged stuff here. There's a reference to original packaging, but that's referring to the existing law. So I'm not really sure. Yeah, I mean, but they like now when you get a to-go thing, they just put like a cover over it, and I guess that satisfies the open container thing. I'm not sure. I'm not a legal analyst, but this is something I think that's definitely worth watching. And I would, given the, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how these parties and different lawmakers fall in on this, because it's not going along party lines. So,
gotcha.
Where else is the influence? What other factors? I mean, I don't just say that these lawmakers are just only like vessels for influence, but I think it's they don't have the party line thing to go on clearly with this one. So either it'll be a slam dunk, or it'll be super interesting to see what the logic is for supporting or not.
Who's not for our small businesses? So Gorberg said to go kits with pre-made drinks. So what do you got something, Landon? What?
They had sort of that same thing here, but it was all bottled up. So I mean, you could get the Bloody Mary mix. It was in a bottle, but then they would sell you like a rail bottle of vodka to go along with it.
Landon, where are you? For people who don't know, give us your vague local.
I'm in Eau Claire.
Okay.
Yeah. So
northern Wisconsin for those who are not in Wisconsin, and we do have some people who watch us and not Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yep.
So Chris, I'm game for all of it. I'm not sure what the holdup is. I'm not sure why we were talking about in 2001 when this should have been done in 2020. That's just my opinion. It should have been a quick thing, and it should have been a thing to you're helping our small businesses. That's all I got.
Plenty of states with pretty restrictive, liquor laws in other areas.
Yeah,
went very quickly to allow this. Last year. So it's.
I would say if
Pennsylvania is a great one.
If Minnesota's allowing beer delivery, why in the hell is Wisconsin not allowing it? I mean, Minnesota has some of the most restrictive alcohol laws ever, and they're doing it. So
they're still dry on Sundays, right?
No. That was within
the last couple years.
2 years, so a year or two. That is really, really new up there.
Right. Anyway, we could discuss that forever. So let's stay with politics, even though I really don't want to. It's sort of politics related. Lastly, we have a story we have a story that we just can't shake here on the Badger Beer Hour. More from our friends at Minocqua.
Yes, I'm hoping that this will be our last word on Minocqua Brewing Company.
It won't be though.
So that little Northwoods Brew Pub has been on this segment more than any other brewery, Wisconsin brewery, since we started this stream last summer, and it's all about the overtly political fights that are being instigated by the brew pub's owner, Democrat Kurt Bangstead. As we kind of I don't know, maybe I should say but as we kind of suspected, Minocqua has been moving its now overtly political beer, Biden beer, a Pilsner bearing an image of the new president, and a beer called Kamala, like the comma punctuation, as in the new vice president, to friendlier political locales like Madison and Milwaukee. It's hashtag progressive beer, is not cheap. It is $16 for a 4-pack of Pilsner, tall boys, as you can see there. $20 for the Kamala Stout, and 5% of the profits are going to the brewery's political action committee, which is dedicated to promoting Democratic candidates in the Northwoods and beyond. 4 packs from the first drop in Madison, which happened the week after the inauguration, sold out within a day at most places or less. And kegs were also delivered to bars and restaurants as well.
Right.
Like Milwaukee's getting its first drop next week.
Right.
I do not think it was a coincidence that at the same time the 4 packs were flying off the shelves in Madison. Some troubling allegations against Bangstead came to light from former employees. In public social media posts which had their names on them, an employee said that she was a former employee said that she was subjected to chronic sexist and abusive managerial behavior that caused her to consider leaving the business entirely. This woman, who is now a head brewer at another Wisconsin brewery, called Bangstead, quote, one of the worst people I've ever encountered. And around the same time, another former employee said Bangstead has operated with kind of veiled has veiled his self-interest in, obviously, I mean, making money that's what businesses do, but he called him out for, wrapping it in this political thing, of course, of which he was also a beneficiary. He ran for state assembly for the seat that surrounds Minocqua. So, yeah. So interestingly, also, it does not appear that this beer is being made in Minocqua. A sell sheet for the beers that's been given to retailers and to where it lines up the cost and the that sort of thing, details about the beer, the labels, that sort of thing, lists a contact at District 1 Brewing in Plover for delivery and orders. So looks like it's being made there. Yeah, District 1 Brewing, of course, also mentioned last month in the Badger Beer Hour news. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Badger Beer Hour news for February.
And that's because, in my opinion, they're doing a lot of this Kamala and Biden beer. I have people texting me, commenting on me, asking me how I get it to them, how they can get it. So he's created a buzz, whether you like him or not. He's doing a good job of getting his word out. And that's all I got. I got people from different states. I don't know about you guys, but I have people from different states inquiring about everything. When that news broke, what you said, I had people in my inbox asking me what's going on. So yeah, he's doing a good job of what he's doing. Again, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah, I think the reason I think it's important to talk about this again is when you're draping your marketing in progressive values and that sort of thing, and then people find out how that you're treating employees. I don't know. I believe her. That's I think that's something that people should consider. And if you still want to buy the beer, that's cool. But it runs contrary to the image that's being put out there. And I think that's why both of these employees surfaced the that's why these allegations came out when they did. Yeah, and it is shut down for the winter, but the brewery's open. I mean, they can make it there if they want to. This is about volume, I think.
Yeah. What's their do you know? You probably don't know offhand what their volume is that they can brew in there. I assume small brew pub.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Yeah.
Sure, but it's a brew pub, so I'm guessing it's not real big.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they reached their limit as far as, again, demand. Once they started doing this, they realized that they were swamped, that people wanted more. Because, again, like I said, I've been hearing it. So I'm not, a great barometer of this, but what I'm hearing is something's going on. That's what I'm saying. So, Chris, you want to wrap the news? That's great. But I have one more thing I want to talk about real quick is that throw in here at the last minute, Parched Eagle ran where am I at here? Parched Eagle ran a GoFundMe. Chris, you're not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be there. Parched Eagle ran a GoFundMe, which just started, I think, less than a week ago to get through the winter. They're just another brewery along the lines having a hard time during COVID, especially during the winter. They were doing well when they could have people in or have people on the balcony. But since they couldn't, and it's been a real rough winter as far as I don't know about you guys, where you guys are at, but it's rare for us to have a lot of snow and then for it to sit for months. Usually it goes and comes back and then but this is sat for months. So hats off to Parched Eagle for reaching their goal, and hats off to their regulars and all my Madison friends who helped them get through this winter with that GoFundMe. So wonderful. It's good news, especially considering we've been talking about closings and people, pulling back, and we expect more of them too as we go. But on that note, fellas, thanks for the news.
Interview, conversation, discussion. You guys up for that? All right. I'm pleased to welcome in Rob Gustafson on the right from Vennture Brewing Company, Vennture Brew Co, and Simon McConico, co-partners. We do not have the third founder and partner of Vennture Brew because he's the morning guy, right?
He's in back roasting coffee right now.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Right down there.
All right. Vennture Brew is a brewery and coffee house, I guess. Coffee roastery, coffee house. Yeah. In Washington Heights, neighborhood of Milwaukee. Just 15 blocks from my house, and this is my favorite local brewery. So I am pleased to welcome the Vennture Brew Co. team to the Badger Beer Hour.
Thank you.
This is absolutely par for the course. All right, guys, tell us a little bit about your about Vennture.
Oh, where would you like us to start?
2017.
No,
15.
Probably 15. 15.
Who knows, yeah.
We started kind of hatching this idea out in 2015. It just kind of stemmed from going on beer tours, and with those kind of resulting in coffee trips also throughout that time in various places. Simon put something together for a group of us, I recall, in Beer Ventures, checking out different places across the country. And those, you check out a bunch of breweries through the course of a day, you wind up at a coffee shop the next morning. And then, we just kind of started talking about it. And
I mean, the plan was hatched kind of as we were in the early teens of the 20s. In Milwaukee, there really weren't any brew pubs at all. There's Lakefront, there was Milwaukee Brewing Company, and there was Sprecher. There were a couple of other random things here and there, but at that point, there really wasn't any place that you could go and sit down and have a beer. And what we saw from a lot of our travels was that's what people were doing. Went to Minnesota, Illinois, Colorado, a couple of other places, took long weekends, went for 4 or 5 days with anywhere from, I think our biggest one was Colorado. We had like 14 guys at one point. Just checking out different breweries and brew pubs, and also checking out coffee shops along the way. But one of the things that Milwaukee at that time was missing was a place that felt like a bar that was actually a brewery. And with Milwaukee being very heavily coffee forward, that was also another thing that came into play when we were talking through things, trying to figure out how to make a space that felt comfortable like a coffee shop, but had the banter and conversation of a bar. So you could sit at the bar and have a latte, but you could also have a conversation with the barista about what you were actually drinking, which was one of the fun things that we found on these trips. We'd go with some of the stuff planned, but had a handful of spaces open in our schedule so that we could sit down at the bar, have a conversation with the bartender, and they could direct us where to go because they know better than us. We're visiting. So they would direct us and say, you got to eat at this restaurant. You need to drink at this place, or you go check out this bar. They have an amazing tap list. So it kind of created a space for us to go out and check out new things, but trying to bring that idea and that experience back home to Milwaukee, and integrate two things that we really love, both beer and coffee. That was kind of the start of the birth of the idea, and then super long journey to get to 2018 when we actually opened.
Yeah. The coffee hybrid, the coffee beer hybrid, is that something that you like? Are there other places that you know of that do brewing and roasting?
When we were starting to hash this out, we could only find one example of it at the time. It was a place in California or Arizona called the Public House that had just completed a Kickstarter, but we couldn't find anything else at that time that was actually came to fruition and was open. Since then, there's been us. I know places like Modern Times started roasting their own coffee. I think Copper State up in Green Bay is doing something similar. I don't think they roast, but they serve coffee on site. But there's been more and more of it. We found there's a place reached out to us a year and a half ago down in I think it was Houston or Austin that was doing something similar. They didn't brew or roast their own, but they served both throughout the course of the day, and they were blowing up down there with a very similar model.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that was a difficult conversation to have during the like the proof of concept stage with like investors, or I'm not sure how you guys finance, but
yeah. So we wound up, yeah. So we started through a small business organization where they set us up with a mentor, and going into our first meeting, had this awesome business plan we spent months working on. Like it was bulletproof. You walk in there, this guy reads through it and he's like, yeah, I don't think this works. He just sat there and like he's like, yeah, you really need it to be more cozy, not open and light. It's one of those things like you know from being in here, like this isn't a dark wood place. It's light, it's airy. There's art on the walls. Most of it's white. It's blonde floors, hardwood floors. And the guy was explaining to us that we needed, something dark wood. We needed booths. We needed models where people could sit there all day while drinking one coffee drink. And then that was going to be the way to our success, and that those two beverages didn't mix.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the figuring out like the business plan and what it was going to cost, and I mean, that was a very long journey. When we started, I think we actually got our LLC in 2016, and then found the building, signed the lease February 2017, and then also closed on a small business loan on that same month. We were approved for the small business loan that same month. It took us until October of that year to actually close the loan, and we couldn't start construction until November of 2017, and then we didn't open until July of 2018.
Yeah.
So we had the building for well over a year before we were actually in here.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of days I would just come here because I had a key. I'd walk around and kind of kick stuff around, thinking, "Man, this is going to be great someday." But then, as that time progressed, you start to question that if it's going to happen or not.
Yeah.
You know, with it something, it was always something. At times, it was comical. You know, like what they were asking for, or the person doing the closing would ask for this document that a week before they said we didn't need.
Yeah.
And it was just constant. It was one of those things where it's like, I don't know if this is actually going to happen. There were a lot of days that I questioned it.
So, but I mean, now you guys are rich, right?
Yeah,
Just
we're small business owners.
Well, I mean,
PPP loan.
how has that business model worked? I mean, one of the things, I mean, I think that like people say, oh, coffee shop and brewery, or bar, tap room, kind of thing, that they don't realize is like you guys are open
all day,
18 hours a day, right?
Not as much anymore.
Right. Well, not anymore, but like normal time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we were open from 5 a.m. until 10 p.m.
every day,
daily. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
And even, I mean, that there was a lot of time in there where there either wasn't a lot of traffic or there wasn't much traffic. And currently, due to COVID, we kind of, in winter, we truncated a lot of those just because we really don't have a ton of seating. We found that we were able to kind of cut those hours, or at least keep all of our staff here and employed and still be able to make enough product to make it work. But the model in general is interesting. There's a lot of things to be thought through where you're actually located. The fact that we're right in a neighborhood that all of us live in is a really big deal. All three of us live probably at most 9 blocks from the shop.
I'm 5, you're 4.
4, Jake's 7 or 8.
Yeah.
So like we're all a part of this community, and so that's been a huge deal because we've been able to build a lot of relationships and friendships with our neighbors who are literally our neighbors, who now have kind of invested ownership in this space.
I'm glad you said there's one word that I zeroed in on there, and that's community. And this is super cliche to talk about a business and community and what that means, but there are very few places that I've patronized where I feel like I am truly sitting in that neighborhood and surrounded by like really a broad cross section of who, I mean, I think it's one of the more diverse neighborhoods in Milwaukee, and I don't mean that just from like demographically, ages and the kinds of people that you would not normally see in a tap room. And I think that hybrid model, you're kind of attracting. I mean, many people go there for coffee and for beer, not at the same time, or sometimes at the same time, but whatever. But you're drawing in just coffee customers and just beer customers and also the both. So it's really a broader cross section of a really interesting and diverse neighborhood in Washington Heights. I mean, can you plan that, or is that just something that happens because of the way it happens? I don't know. Maybe that's not a question.
I think we got to, we've all lived over here for quite a while, and we realized that in this area in general, the surrounding blocks, we're in Washington Heights. To our north is Uptown Crossing. We've got the Sherman Park area, East Tosa, and a couple other places. We realized though that everybody was leaving this area for at least beer. That was one of those things that there was no local brewery at this point in town.
There wasn't even a local bar that was serving craft beer.
Yeah. So if you wanted something, not that Ray's is far away, but that's on 90th.
Mhm.
A little ways away, and then to the east, there's nothing. North and south from here, there's nothing. So it's one of those things like you would either have to go out to Beloba and Brookfield if you want a brewery, or you're heading down to Third Space would probably be the closest, or City Lights right there, which isn't walkable or bikeable for these neighborhoods, particularly. And I think it's something we deep in our heart knew that this would happen, but I think it was more evident a couple weeks after opening that, holy heck, this is going to happen. Of it being the neighborhoods. There was one night in particular that sticks with me. We had a beer called 49th Street where I used to live on 49th and Cherry. We just started naming beers after street names in the neighborhood because we were cranking out so many different things. It was just easier to do. But there was a night that neighbors from 49th filled Vennture. Literally no one had walked or driven. It was they all biked or walked. At one point, I looked outside and the street pole that's directly in front of our place was probably had 15 bikes tied up to it. And I just wound up chatting with everybody in here at some point, and nobody had driven. It was all walked and biked, which it just blew my mind at that point. It was like, holy,
that's it, right? I mean, that's
weird. Yeah, like that's what you want.
Yeah.
And I think at that point for me, that's when I realized that this is going to be a community spot and not forcing it and being cliche, just putting it in the name, hoping people show up.
Yeah. I think too, our motto or logo or whatever, it's coffee beer community. When we were talking through starting this, both coffee and beer are very social beverages. You go out with friends and you have beer. You meet someone for coffee. Both of them can be done alone, but both of them are very, very social things. So creating a spot that facilitates that on top of a location that has a wide diversity of people, and that's fairly centrally located in a city, makes it pretty easy for it to be a meeting spot for people. And people who are in this neighborhood take ownership of it and then want to see other people enjoy this space, which is cool because we don't have to sell it. They do that for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one thing that Vennture is is the only Black-owned brewery in Wisconsin. Simon, you talk a little bit about what that means to you, or how that fits in with all of this?
Yeah, so that's kind of a broad question, which
it is. I want you to take it wherever you want to take it.
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into that. Part of it is even just my identity of who I am. So my dad is Black. He's mixed. We're not totally sure. His father died when he was 6, so we don't have a lot of information about my grandfather and what his history was like. But I came out the lightest of my four siblings, and it's growing up. I'm from Minneapolis. I grew up in the city. Went to a high school that was predominantly African American and Asian, and so I was a white kid in that situation. So, and strictly on skin color of what I looked like. Mm-hmm. So for me, growing up, a lot of those formative years, I viewed myself as a white kid and didn't really have a lot of thought process through what I actually was and what my heritage was. Going to college, on the other hand, I was surrounded by a bunch of white people from Iowa. I went to a private college in Minneapolis, but there was a lot of white people from suburban or rural areas, and having conversations or being perceived as white in those conversations and being privy to them not knowing my background and my history and kind of who I was gave me a better perspective on who I actually am. I think anybody who is biracial or multiracial has to at some point go through a exploration period, or trying to even just figure out who and what they are, and how they identify. There's a lot of really difficult and weird questions that go into that too.
Yeah.
So I think with all of that history, bringing that into today, I think it's I enjoy a lot of white privilege because of the color of my skin, because I'm very light, because people don't have history of knowing my father or where I come from. I get the exact same treatment as somebody who was white. And so I feel like sometimes that can take away from the struggle that people who have a darker skin had to go through in order to open their brewery or to start their business, because it's not fair. Opening our space was by no means simple or easy or a cakewalk. None of us come from wealth. None of us are independently wealthy. And so there was a lot of scrambling, a lot of talking, a lot of trying to find money from here and there. But we are not, that process was probably looked very different than somebody who was an actual, like, had darker skin and tried to open a business, let alone a brewery in a very monocultural industry like beer.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really difficult, or it's maybe not difficult, but it's a more long-winded conversation about why and how versus just kind of labeling it as this.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I thank you for sharing all that. I mean, I know it's very personal, but I think it says a lot about, you know, the industry. And I mean, did you get the sense that you and the group were treated any different because of any you know, because of identity at all? Or did people not even really pick up on it?
I don't think people picked up on it.
Yeah.
I don't know that they did.
There's a lot of times where people will say to me at the bar, like, "Oh, 3 dudes that are white opened a brewery," and like stop someone. It's like, no, like that's. Well, and then bring it up to Simon about Simon, and they're like, "Oh, I thought he was Hispanic." Like, and it's just weird. Yeah, it's such an odd thing that
Simon, you kind of mentioned seeing some of that, like being talked about, like you're one of, like, you're white, you know, like you're not kind of in this community.
Yeah,
and that I think that might lead to some, I don't know,
super weird conversations.
Yeah, yep. Right.
Yeah.
Well, what's that?
Really offhanded remarks that people don't realize.
Right. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And we didn't even mention the beer really that much, but we're running long on a couple of these segments, so we want to keep it moving. But I'll just say I'm drinking right now. It was the last one I had in my house. It's a Tiny Boss held over from summer, which is a really cool beer. It's a barrel fermented table beer, so it's got a little bit of that. Is it Brett, or can't even really say what it is? Because it comes from the barrel, right? So you don't know what's in the barrel. So
kinda, there's a culture. So talking about neighborhood stuff, one of our neighbors was an avid home brewer, and we connected prior to opening this. and he is a big fan of funky sour beers. There's a Facebook group called Milk the Funk, which is a collection of home brewers, professional brewers, scientists,
biologists,
who've done a lot of really amazing things for sour beer, and just the not vast knowledge base of sour beer. Brett and Lactobacillus pediococcus, all of the other side yeasts and bacterias that there are haven't really gotten a lot of study because Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Pastorianus take center stage.
A lot of money in those.
Yeah. Ale and lager, that's where money goes,
right?
Because it's predictable, right? Or it's more predictable, and British and German brewers have bred lager yeast to be predictable, and so all the science went to that. Not a lot of science went to all the other fun stuff. But there was a guy who collected a ton of different dregs of things at different Milk the Funk meetups, and he would brew with that, and then he'd send that out to other people, and they would brew, and then they'd send it back to him and brew. So there's stuff from all over the world.
Yeah, he was like the guy over here. He cultured a yeast, a wild yeast off of some flowers that his wife had grown. He was able to isolate some of it, send it to this guy, who then put all of them together. I think it was something like 70 to 100 different strains of wild yeast are in it. Yeast and bacteria, and he just kind of started fermenting stuff with it and enjoyed what it did.
Yeah.
It changed each time, so there really wasn't any consistency to it.
Yeah.
So Nick got a vial of it from this guy, and we propagated it up.
The yeast in this beer was cultivated from a flower grown in Milwaukee.
A lot of different things.
Yeah, that's one that probably 100 different strains of wild yeast in there from all over the world. But some of that.
I mean, you said something about. You referred to sour beer a couple times, and I almost jumped in because there's a touch of tartness on this, but you have the wild character for sure without really the over. I mean, I think people hear sours and they're like, real subtle.
The bacteria in there isn't very hop tolerant. So even with the very light hopping, that beer did not get tart.
Mm-hmm.
The starters of it when we were propagating it that had 0 hops in it got tart and really funky. But even with just a little bit of hops, completely changed the yeast. But in a pretty fantastic way that allowed it to be enjoyed by a lot of people that don't normally like sours.
Yeah, for sure. And
the colloquial name of the actual yeast culture, if you ever want to look it up on the Milk the Funk wiki, is it was called the Mud King. So that was what people reference it as. They can't call it that because it was named after a comic book something or another, and there's trademark this and that. I don't know, but that's what people refer to that collection of yeasts as.
Awesome. So I wouldn't say that this is my favorite Vennture beer, but it's close. It's up there. I mean, this is basically a one-off, right? I mean,
we might have some more for you.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we do a lot. We all come from a background of figuring shit out, and that's kind of how we started brewing. That's how Jake started roasting. Prior to that, Jake and I had our own photography business, and Rob did a lot of photography as well. And a lot of the hobbies that we do end up turning into careers or some form of terrible drain on our psyche. But we just come from the space of, I don't know how to do it. I'm going to figure it out. Let's talk to a bunch of people, read as much resources as we can, blah, blah, blah. So we kind of took that same idea with a lot of the barrels that we use. So that barrel that's the third beer that was in that barrel. we have another beer in those barrels, that set of barrels. So that'll be 4 turns that we've used those barrels for. We took our Imperial Stout from our very first year. It was in apple brandy barrels. When we removed that, we put a dark saison in those barrels. And when we removed that, we put actually, we haven't put anything in it yet. We're going to put a saison in there. But we just keep reusing things because it allows us to explore a lot of fun things. And right now we have the flexibility and opportunity to do that. Our normal or cleaner beers provide us opportunity to create weird things and let them kind of sit in our barrel cave under our garage.
Yeah. And I'll say for Michael here, definitely beers you want to check out are the Bruv series of Berliners. Lots of fruit variants, all really well done. Nicely balanced, not pucker bomb. A lot of great hazy IPAs, and with various series and hop combinations and all that stuff. And my favorite, you know what it is? It's the Heights. You guys both got it?
Yeah. So we just got a square fermenter, which I'm super excited about. Saison Dupont ferments all of their stuff in square fermenters. It's a lot of Belgians ferment in that. It's lower pressure, creates more esters, but it's a 15-barrel tank, and that's first batch we're going to do in that is the Heights. So that's super excited about.
It's like 3 times our normal batch size.
Yeah,
it's going in there. So
yes,
more.
I'll be over as soon as it's ready.
Yeah, which for you who don't know, the Heights is a saison. It's just kind of a super simple table beer. It's hopped with Mandarina Bavaria and Crystal hops, and it's yeast forward and
named after the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to our community aspect there.
Right on. All right, guys, we are running way over. Thank you for coming on.
That's our metal album.
That's the brewery before the brewery was in there.
Thanks so much for coming on, and I can't wait to be down there and having a beer at the bar.
We miss your face.
Indeed.
Well, I'll get a haircut before I come over.
Please don't.
No.
Thanks, fellas.
You're in a vulnerable position there, Chris. That was a great interview. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was a very little part of it.
Those are usually the best interviews where the interviewer is very little part of it.
That's true.
At least from my point of view, yeah.
Now we got a beer spotlight.
Yeah.
It's winter, late winter actually, which is great. Not really in Wisconsin, but kind of in the technical sense.
Yeah.
And February is Doppelbock time, traditionally, and I am not a huge Doppelbock fan. I don't know. It's not really my jam, but I'm starting to. One of the things about being a beer critic or enthusiast or whatever the hell you want to call me, is you try things that you don't normally jam, that aren't normally your jam, and try to evaluate them on what they are and what the point is and what they're trying to do. And this month's beer spotlight is one of those endeavors. So the Great Dane. Ooh, that's a bad shine there. Shoot, getting some glare. The Great Dane has I'll call it a new beer, even though it's definitely not that. So it's called John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz Dunkel Doppel Hefeweizen Bock. Hence the JJ. Boy, you guys can't see that at all, can you? JJJSDDDHB. It has the letter combination DDH in it, which is going to throw off a lot of people at the bottle shop, I bet, because it is not double dry hopped. Okay, so this is a dark Weizenbach, and first of all, a little bit about the Great Dane in this series. What they're doing is opening up the kind of their beer archives this year and canning a whole bunch of the kind of pub favorites that have not been canned so far. They've been canning since, I believe, I want to say 2016 maybe, and have done a relatively limited amount of beers, particularly a limited amount of beers from like their kind of classic brew pub lineup, and they're starting to dip into those beers this year. This is the first one. The next one up is Old Glory American Pale Ale, which I drank a ton of when I was living back in Madison in the early mid 2000s. So, but John Jacob Jingleheimer, Uncle Doppel. John Jacob is a beer that is modeled on Aventinus, which is the Schneiderweiss kind of. It is the archetype of dark Weizenbach. The Weizenbachs come in okay. All right, Weizenbach is obviously this is a Weiss beer, and it has that German Hefeweizen strain, or it's in that kind of class of the super banana estery, clove, phenol, that kind of classic Hefeweizen yeast character.
Yep.
That's transposed essentially onto a bigger beer. So it's kind of like an imperial Hefeweizen. It even has, it's kind of hard to see here, but it is pretty fizzy in the way that a Hefeweizen is fizzy, which is pretty unusual for a big beer like this. But it's and then obviously this one is a dark Weizenbach, so they come kind of in different families. But this is the dark. So I mean, the Doppelbock character or comparison is pretty apt. It has that kind of bigness and fullness to it, and it's got the same character. There you go. Is that it? Oh, that's from Brewers Association. The style. So Aventinus is a 107-year-old beer. It was rolled out in 1907, so it's 114 years old. And this beer is actually super, like the other Weizenbach that people talk about a lot is Vitus from I'm blanking on the brewery. It's another Bavarian one. It's gonna kill me.
What's the beer called?
It's called Vitus, Vitus, and you think about a German Weizenbach.
Yeah.
You kind of assume that it's going to be old. That beer was introduced in 2007. John Jacob has been brewed at the Great Dane since the mid 90s. So it's got about 10 years on one of the really kind of best regarded Weizenbachs in the world. Vitus is a light Weizenbach.
It's
Schneider.
Vitus is Weihenstephaner.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
Of course. That's the oldest brewery in the world. It's like 1,000 years old. So, this Dane beer, this is the first time a lot of people are going to be seeing it because it's in bottle shops now, but it's got some pedigree here. And the brewmaster of the Great Dane, Rob Lobreglio, is Aventinus was one of his favorite beers, and he modeled beer on that. And I wrote about this beer for my my column in the State Journal. Comes out on Sunday, and I did a side-by-side tasting of these two beers of not Vitus but Aventinus, and they are very similar. I mean, I think Aventinus had a lot more kind of cohesion, and when a beer just kind of comes together well, every piece kind of fits a little bit. But right. Certainly the character, the flavor profile, the yeast profile, all that stuff was super similar. So if you dig Aventinus, you're definitely going to want to check this one out. And come on, man. All right, so let's take a whiff of this. Lots of kind of, I mean, that banana clove. More, I get more kind of on the banana side of it. This is a divisive style. I think people who don't like Hefeweizens are just like just way away from it. But it's there's a lot of kind of caramel toffee from the darker malts that give it that Doppelbock character, and again, the body is super full but high carbonation. It's a super interesting beer, and I don't really get down with Weizenbachs a whole lot, but I really enjoyed this little foray into the style because it's so freaking cold this weekend, and it's like just snowing all the time. It's like, give me a break. give me a big old 7% beer that I can drink 16 ounces of and just curl up and be cozy. I'm big on the hiji. The higi. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's pronounced really weird, but I don't know. Guys, what do you think of this?
I go ahead, Greg.
No, you first, man.
Chris, have you ever had like that hot poked beer where they take the hot iron and poke it into a beer? That really,
I'm fascinated by it, and I want to do it.
I've done it, and it's great. It makes the beer, it gives it a whole nother level, I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
Well, the idea there is you get that caramelization instantly in the finished product instead of on the back end where every dark malt has some level of caramelization. That's what gives it color.
I would be interested in especially like that, a Weizenbach, if you could do it. I know you could do it to it, whether or not it would actually do the same things that a regular Bach beer or with that banana and the clove. I wonder how that would react.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting matchup of styles, really. I mean, we don't really think of Germans as being like, oh, let's just cross everything together, American brewers do that all the time.
Yep.
But this is a great example of like they put that Hefeweizen strain in pretty much everything. Yeah. They've got the big beers, the small beers, they got the big dark. They've got the dark. There's a Dunkelweiss. Dunkelweiss as well as Dunkelweizen, I guess. Is basically a more of a Hefeweizen, lower ABV, kind of more standard table beer strength with dark malts in it. So I mean, you see that kind of all the different iterations of what the Germans do with their wheat beers, with this yeast profile. So it's pretty fun, and it was a lot of fun to kind of compare and contrast this beer to one of the like most well-regarded beers in the world, and know that it's, I mean, obviously the scale of what American brewers have been doing is just different. On what the Weihenstephan is like literally almost 1,000 years old,
right? Yeah, but
that this beer is right there as far as kind of the pedigree of big Weizenbachs. It's cool. And hats off to the Great Dane for bringing this one forward. I was really, Greg. You're in Madison, so you got some Great Dane experience. Are you any beers that you're kind of pub favorites that you're hoping that they roll out in cans?
The what's the Scotch ale?
Stone of Scone.
Stone of Scone.
Which has been released in cans. That one has been
right. That is the one that, in my opinion, they do best. That's, for me, that's their flagship. So I'm not, Chris, where I get thrown off on Great Dane real fast is that when you go to different Great Danes, you get different, or at least before the pandemic, you get different specialty ones. So they always have their, their 6 or whatever, and then you get different specialty ones. So that always threw me off in a good way, because I could go to different ones and have a different styles. Problem with that is that it's hard to really love one of their off styles because you don't know sometimes where to find them. And if you really love one, they're in and out. So I'm interested to see what kind of what goes on after the pandemic. But on that note, guys, it's time for us to wrap. We had a great conversation with the interview. We want to throw again our thanks to the Vennture Brewing company fellas. To me, we could spend an hour with those guys. I mean, the whole dynamic of coffee and beer, for me, you could talk 3 hours on that one and I'll be set looking at it. I love coffee in the morning, beer in the afternoon. I mean, if I live there, man. So thanks, Chris, for hooking up that interview and also conducting it in a professional manner that Landon and I could never get away with. So, so Landon, before we get there, before we catch off, somebody wanted me to, there's something here. We got more than one comment that people love the accents in your last name.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, I figured if you're gonna keep calling me Landon Cherney,
yes,
I better put the accents up there yeah.
So it's my fault.
Not fault.
Oh, okay.
It's because of you.
I was gonna say fault, but thanks, Daniel Fisher, for that. Next, the next Badger Beer Hour is St. Patrick's Day, March 17th.
Hey.
I don't know who did the scheduling for this stream, but we have Inauguration Day, and now we have St. Patrick's Day. I'm not sure who's doing all this, but I like to see you. So we'll see you fellas on St. Patrick's Day.
Schlancha.
Any last notes?
Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got to do this thing, Landon, or otherwise.